Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Madman with a Mic. I am going to be talking today about hurricanes. Why? Because we just got scraped on our ass by a major hurricane. And why not? It's hurricane season. It's a good topic to bring up. And I think I have a lot of fucking experience with it. So today we're going to go into a little bit of my personal experience with hurricanes, a personal story of mine that I've shared with a few people, and I want to share with everybody else, and where we see the future of how hurricanes are going to be reviewed, discussed, and predicted, and everything as such. So let's start off right off the bat with hurricanes in general and how, it affects everybody on the eastern seaboard of the United States, the Caribbean, all that area where basically hurricanes and typhoons hit. This is for you guys, and everybody that lives in that area knows well how they are obnoxious because they can be either slow moving, like this last hurricane is, that literally stalled out over the sea and was going 0 miles per hour, or they could be really fast moving, like Hurricane Andrew, hours, or say like Matthew that lasted almost a full day over Central Florida, and so many other hurricanes that they really devastate and destroy a lot of lives, I think. And I think it's an important topic to bring up because a lot of people don't talk about the effects of hurricanes on people. They talk about a dollar amount, this and that and the other. You can't put a dollar amount on people's lives. I'm sorry. Some people can, insurance claims can, they claim that they could do that. I don't believe that for a second, and I don't agree with it. Whether they want to accept it or not, that's up to them, but I don't agree with putting a dollar amount on a person's life. Ever, in any way or form. And I work in pharmacy, so I see it all the time by insurance companies and such. But we're talking about hurricanes. First story, I wanna tell you my personal experience with Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Andrew was a major Cat 5 hurricane. It was the strongest hurricane that hit the United States for, I think it was like almost 40-50 years or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the exact specifics of how long it was, they hadn't seen anything like it, but that storm was a monster. And the fact is that it was a tiny hurricane. If this thing was any bigger, if it was, say, the size of Matthew, that it covered half the state of Florida, we would have sustained a lot more damage and a lot more people would have died because of this. Now, before I share the story, I want to go into a little bit of effects that Hurricane Andrew had on people in general, and Florida for that matter. Florida, because of it, they were enforcing stricter building codes after Andrew, because they caught on to the fact that before Andrew, the builders and such, they skimmed on supplies, and they would basically make these really cheap houses. Paper doll houses, it was really, really bad, and they would fall apart, and that's the reason so many people died, was because the houses were literally built like if they were built for the north, where there's no hurricanes, there's no wind damage that could possibly happen, and that doesn't apply here. You can't do that here, because we're in Florida, we get hit by hurricanes all the time, and Andrew luckily was the first major storm we had in a long time, and we hadn't seen any repercussions of that building code, the lack of building code that was not enforced at all. And after Andrew, they did enforce it, and it's become standard now to build to a certain code in Florida, and every house after that code was implemented has been built up to speed, and it can sustain winds up to Cat 5 hurricane, which is pretty incredible. Sustained winds, not gusts. That's really catchy. Now, sustained winds, some people might seem confused by that. Sustained winds is basically, that is the wind gust that will continuously occur inside of a hurricane, inside the circumference of the hurricane, usually close to the eye wall of the hurricane. The eye wall of the hurricane is the centermost spot of the hurricane circulation, that the whole circulation of the hurricane happens around this eye. The eye is the completely calm part of the hurricane. It is the part where there's nothing that occurs. It's literally very slow winds. It's usually very minimal winds, honestly. And it's very calm, extremely calm. There's no cloud coverage. There's nothing. It is the most bizarre thing in the world to experience. And when I go into the story about Hurricane Andrew, get a little bit more in depth about what happened to me during the eye of the storm. And it's incredible. Hurricanes are a phenomenon that it's really incredible to witness. It's Mother Nature at its most destructive. I wouldn't say bad, because Mother Nature isn't bad. Hurricanes are essential to everything. I mean, the fact is that it cleans up. It cleans our atmosphere. It cleans our areas. Everything in nature is for a reason. There's nothing in nature that is useless, that doesn't have a purpose. So hurricanes have a purpose, and it's just very hard for us to see it because all we see is the destructive side of it. But there is a purpose to this. There is a method to the madness, I guess you could say. And hurricanes are important to the planet. So let's put that aside. Now time for the story time. So Hurricane Andrew happened in August 1992. I was 7 years old. And my father, like all hurricanes and stuff like that, where he watched it closely and all that stuff. But Hurricane Andrew was special. It went up to the coastline of Florida and just stayed there. It stayed over the Bahamas, close to over the Bahamas, and just lingered there for almost 2 days. It literally stalled out there for 2 days and rebuilt itself slowly. And it turned from, I think, a Cat 2, if I'm not mistaken, or a Cat 3 to a Cat 5. But a Cat 5 to the extreme where they actually wanted to classify it as a Cat 6 because the sustained winds, quote unquote, were, I think it was 215 miles per hour. So this thing was a monster. And by a monster, I mean a monster. And it was a big fish, for lack of a better word. And honestly, it was strong. We lived in Homestead at the time, right across from Metro Zoo. The eye of the storm crossed over Homestead. So the eye of the storm covered the area where I lived in. It came right over our area. How do I know this? Because I experienced it. And I can tell you firsthand everything that happened to me. Now, let's start right from the beginning. And my dad woke me up in the middle of the night. And he, being a child, you don't know any better. You don't know what's going on. My dad wakes me up in the middle of the night from my room and he goes, "We gotta go downstairs." And I'm like, "Okay, fine, let's go downstairs." So I start walking down, and my house was a 2-floor house. And I was walking down from the second floor to the first floor. And there was a little, in the middle of the stairs, there was it's a 2-tier stairs, right? And right in the middle, there's a little platform that you could stop in, right? And it's a little square and goes down to the next level after that. Well, right there on that platform, my dad was still upstairs, so I look up and I go, "Dad, where are you? Where are you?" In Spanish, of course. And I look up and I see the attic door going upwards. The attic door, mind you, in Florida, is basically a panel with a hole in the roof. So there's a panel right on top of that hole in the what do you call it, that goes into the attic, and it's basically just, there's nothing holding it. So granted, it doesn't take much to do this, but it scared the living shit out of me when I saw that door move up into the attic and then drop down suddenly. I was like, holy shit. And later on I found out that it was actually from the pressure of the wind that was building up in the attic. It was sucking it up into the roof, into the attic further because of the pressure of the storm. So it was getting sucked up into the roof. That's how powerful the storm was, right? And then we went into the utility room, which is basically like the laundry room mixed in and all that stuff. And my dad had years ago, he reinforced that wall with basically like a bike rack, so he could hang the bikes over the laundry area. And he built like these 2x4s across that wall and another wall as well. So it was the safest room in the house, basically. And we figured, screw it, this is going to be the safest place to be. There's no window, there's nothing that could actually do any damage to us. So my dad and my mom dragged me in there, and we went in, and we were there for about 2 hours, I believe. And I specifically remember seeing the door of the room bending inwards. Mind you, I was 7 years old, so I remember this very, like, a lot of it, I think a lot of the gaps in my memory were filled in by my dad and my mom that told me the story afterwards. So, take this with a grain of salt. It's mostly my personal experience, but it's also a lot of recollections from my parents as well. So this is not all just me personally remembering it, because that's kind of, that's not realistic, let's be honest. And basically I remember seeing that door bend towards us, and I was like, oh crap, are we gonna die here? Like, this is some scary shit. And I remember my dad just saying, don't worry, we got this, we're gonna do as much, trying to keep both my mom and myself calm. And all I remember hearing on the news was, the worst of the storm is yet to come, the worst of the storm is yet to come. And I'm like, the worst of the storm? Aren't we going through the worst of the storm? Apparently not, according to the news. And so yeah, they were basically scaring people straight to make sure people were actually staying safe and not doing something stupid that they'll regret later on. So it's important to do that in a hurricane, and something as catastrophic as this especially. But overall, I think that the most important thing was that my parents were trying to keep us calm. But it's hard to keep calm when the door in front of you is bending and water is leaking in, not from the roof, from the light bulb that illuminates the room. Mind you, these are old light bulbs. These are the light bulbs that had literally the filaments and bulbs, right? And that bulb was filling up with water inside the bulb and then draining out into the floor. Mind you, me being short, it didn't take much to fill up and go up to my waist, but the water was up to my waist, and it was one of the most scariest experiences ever, being submerged in water in your house and not knowing what was going on, because I had no clue what a hurricane was, much less what the hell was going on at the time. I don't remember what I was feeling or the emotions that I was feeling, because I think us as humans, we block out anything that's as traumatic as that, and we kind of push it to the side so we don't have to go through it. But all I know is that I definitely was traumatized by this, and it was a very, very traumatic experience. And going through that, it makes you realize all the shit that could happen in a hurricane. That wasn't all of it, though. So this wasn't even halfway through the storm. And then we kept hearing on the news, and this is recollections from my parents mostly, because I don't remember this part. They were saying that the worst of the storm is yet to come. that the second half of the storm, the eye of the storm, is going to be worse than the first half of the storm. At this point, my dad started freaking out. And this was 92. So we don't have cell phones. We don't have anything to communicate with anybody about anything that's going on. And even if we could, the lines were I'm pretty sure they're down at this point. And we heard shit all over the house, falling apart, coming apart. It sounded like a freight train was outside of our house, surrounding the house. We kept hearing banging sounds. We kept hearing things falling apart, glass shattering, things that just, it makes you like feel these movies that occur about tornadoes and such so much more. And you're like, wow, this is, yeah, it might be amusing and crazy action and all that stuff, but experiencing it firsthand is scary as shit. And I remember hearing a loud bang, like earth-shattering bang, and both of us, my dad, all three of us rather, my dad, my mom, and myself freaked out, and we're like, holy shit, what was that sound? And then we hear, like, the winds calm down a little bit, and our next door neighbor, Eric, screaming at the top of his lungs, Louis, which is my dad, obviously. He has the same name as me. And we're like, oh shit, what's going on? And so my dad goes outside. He opens the door because the wind's calmed down. He's like, oh, we're finally in the eye of the storm, I guess. So he goes over to the neighbor's house quickly as he could, and he found out that the house, the roof came apart and shit was flying everywhere. He barely made it out of our house because he had to go through all the shambles that our house was right now. And there was glass all over the place, there was shit all over the place, everything was broken, the windows were shattered in, there was stuff all over the place, things that he couldn't imagine. He couldn't comprehend what it was on the floor. And we later found out that it was all the insulation, it was all the wood from the roof of the house that fell into the house, and furniture from upstairs that fell into the bottom floor. And then my dad comes back to us and he goes, all right, we're going to go across the street. And we're like, what the hell? You know, I remember my mom specifically saying, what are you talking about? We're going across the street. Are you crazy? There's a storm going on. He goes, the roof blew off the house. We need to go across the street now. Eric's house is the same way. It's not any better. So my mom immediately, okay, fine. How are we going to cross the street with a kid? And the same thing with them. They had 2 kids. So what he did is he tied, you know, those orange extension cords, the long extension cords that they use for like generators and all that stuff. Well, he had a really long one. I think it was like a 100-foot one or something like that. He tied himself, tied my mom, and then tied me. And my mom carried me, and we walked across the street. My dad grabbed his, you know, anything that he could that was necessary to survive, basically. And we went across the street to the only house in the block that was only 1 floor. Because apparently Eric and my dad were like, yes, this is the only house that we could go to that might possibly have a roof. Just critical thinking quickly, you know, it's the quickest they could do. So we get out of the house, and it was incredible. I remember this so vividly. This is my own personal recollection of it. I remember the clouds being this kind of like this. You know how the sand, you know, the sand sculptures and stuff like that have like the hand gestures and hand movements. So it has like these weird like swirls and curves and things like that look like fingerprints, that look like fingers that went through the sand. Well, that's what it looked like in the sky. It looked like that. It looked like a finger painting up in the sky. It looked like something out of a Vincent van Gogh painting. It was bizarre. It was the most surreal thing in the world. And the wind was picking up already. So I'm guessing that it was the end of the eye of the storm, or it was the corner of it, that we were already coming out of the eye, and the wind was so strong, hitting my face. I just remember having, that ear pain that you get when there's a lot of wind going on. It was that feeling, that sensation of like discomfort in my ear and across my body, and the pressure. I just remember feeling this intense pressure on my body, and the rain starting to drizzle, on. But the drizzle felt like people were pinching your skin. That's how strong it was coming. And then I remember the wind carrying things in the middle of the road and stuff like that. And we stopped on the sidewalk for a little bit, or what could be considered the sidewalk, because you couldn't see shit on the floor at all. It was completely like the grass, the trees, branches, everything was scattered all over the place, to the extent you can't see shit anywhere. And then we went across the street, and we found basically that everybody in the neighborhood decided to go to this one house, because everybody in the neighborhood was going through the same thing. They lost the roof of their houses, and we needed to survive. The only way to survive is going to the one house that has one story, surrounded by the houses that have 2 stories. And so we did, and we survived. We survived, all of us, except a few people in our neighborhood that weren't able to make it out of their house. Right down the street on a cul-de-sac, one of my personal friends, and this is only the people that I knew, the daughter was impaled by flying debris. So she did not survive. So we did lose one person that we knew of in the hurricane, and was a close friend of mine, because we went to school together and we hung out, the kids of the block type of thing, so we all hung out together and all that. And it was devastating, that. And we were left without a home. When we went back, the whole second floor was completely obliterated. Like, there was nothing standing on the second floor. I mean, literally nothing standing on the second floor. The shower, the only thing, which we joke about, the only thing that was left still standing was the shower head. The pipes of the shower head were the only things that stayed up in the second floor. So it was pretty incredible seeing that. There was something very ominous about it, and we had to end up going to relatives' houses, jumping from house to house, and staying in different people's houses until we were finally able to move back into a house again, and afford to move into a house, because we lost everything, including the cars, everything. So yeah, it was tough, man. It was really tough. And ever since then, hurricanes just become kind of like a regular happenstance now in Florida. And growing up in Miami especially, there's a couple other instances which we have had close calls, or to the point where I just don't give a shit anymore about the hurricanes. And I watch them closely, and if I start seeing them get really powerful, and I'm like, okay, that's going to potentially hit us, then I'll start getting worried and start like, okay, we gotta board up, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. Now I know what to do because of that personal experience, though. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't go through these personal experiences. And no matter what you do to prepare for the storm, you're never going to be ready for a storm. A hurricane could happen, and it could be nothing, or it could be completely devastating and you lose everything. And then there's the middle ground. But no matter what you do, you're not going to be ready for that storm. Like, you could prepare all you want, you're not going to be ready for it, though, ever. You could buy all the supplies that you want, you could buy all the water in Publix and go completely apeshit with food and stuff like that. A lot of times, it's not going to help. It's honestly not. Because the supplies will go bad, the supplies might not survive the hurricane if your house is damaged. You gotta prepare for the worst, yes, but you cannot go out and forget your humanity in in the face of this. Because if you forget your humanity, then we cease to be a society. And that is, I think, the biggest takeaway of hurricanes. Me personally, I enjoy going through hurricanes for one reason only, is the sense of community that comes out of it. After this, it was incredible the amount of people that came out and helped to rebuild Miami, particularly Homestead. And it was incredible seeing this community come together. Everybody from all walks of life, everybody and anybody, no racism, no class system, all that stuff just kind of faded away. It melted away and melted to the sides, and it just became about human and human. And you needed to help each other, because you needed to help each other to survive. Our basic instincts of tribal thought happened, and we all helped each other survive after this hurricane. The fact is that half our neighborhood ended up in one house. This one person allowed all these people to come into his house because it was the right thing to do. That doesn't happen that often. When you have that sense of community that's lacking nowadays, trust your neighbors. Go out, make it happen. See if it changes your mind. Talk to your neighbors. Make friends with them. Because guess what? If something happens, you might have to count on that person, or they might have to count on you. And I think that's what makes us a society. Not if we turn our back on each other all the time and we don't pay attention to each other, we don't help each other. That sense of community is lost. Then what are we as a society if we lose that? Then we're nothing. We're nothing but a bunch of pack animals just trying to get food. That's not a way to live life. I'm sorry, but it's not. We have to be able to, yes, enjoy life, but also build our society, build our culture. And it's very important to make sure that you actually do work as a community after hurricane. It's incredible that people don't see that. And I think that comes out here in Florida during hurricanes a lot, especially recently in the last 20 years. So every time I see a hurricane now, as an adult, I've seen that sense of community. I've seen that happen in an apartment building I lived. It was incredible seeing everybody come out of their apartment building, out of their apartment rather, and actually interact with their neighbors. Mind you, neighbors in apartment buildings are very suspicious of one another. They're very oh, let me just keep it to myself. It's not a house. I don't want to, give the wrong impression type of shit. And sometimes you just don't like your neighbors. At least that was the sense in Miami. But that aside, in every hurricane, the whole neighborhood will come out and help each other. We'll party, we'll drink, hang out, talk shit for a couple hours before the storm actually started revving up and before anything actually happened. And then afterwards, we were there for each other. We were there to help each other, support each other, both emotionally and physically. And anything that needed to get repaired, done, anything that needed to occur that might have needed another person's hand. It all worked together. We became a society. We became a community. And I think that sense of community is very important in ourselves. We need to look at that. We need to strive for that. So that's what I wanted to get out with this episode about the hurricane and everything. Now that we are in hurricane season, we got to look at that. Look at the bigger picture and try to be, don't pressure people to go to work when there's hurricane or a tropical storm warning. That the owners of the company are very, very good about that. And even though the hurricane didn't hit us, we still ended up having 2 days off because they felt it right to do that. and just in case. And they gave us fair warning ahead of time. It wasn't last minute or anything like that. And I really appreciate that. It's one of the first jobs where I could actually say that I actually feel like people care about me. So that goes back to a sense of community and all that stuff. That goes back to that and adds to that. I think we as a culture need to have that sense of community as well with our employees, with our neighbors, with our friends, with our family. So I'll leave you guys with that food for thought for next episode. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Madman with a Mic. So we'll see you guys soon.